I'm Ruben, and welcome to Conversions 2021. I'll be your host today, and normally I'd be welcoming you to the Foundry in Dublin, Google's EMEA headquarters. But as we are all aware, the last year has been anything but normal. So instead, let me welcome you to a little bit of history making, because this, the 11th instalment of Conversions, is the very first one we've held online. Now, it won't come as a shock to anyone to know that online demand has increased hugely over 2020. And as such, I hope that our choice for the theme of Conversions 2021, Focus on a Mobile Future Now, is one that everyone can genuinely connect with. So let's see what we've got for the next 60 minutes. We're going to hear from a host of experts, including the Google Market Insights team. We're going to understand why it's so important to invest in optimizing the mobile experience for business success. We're going to arm ourselves with the learnings from 100 user testing labs. And importantly, we're going to understand how to generate buy-in and support from across the business so we can all focus on a mobile future now. And just because we're not all here in Dublin doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity to win a little bit of Google swag. I'll be popping up at various times across the live stream with a few spot questions. Those who are the quickest right answers will win themselves some great prizes, so keep your eyes out for that. Now, as you'd expect, Conversions 2021 isn't just about this live stream element. As soon as we're finished here, we'll be releasing 5 on-demand videos that will deep dive into 5 key topics: measurement, metrics, UX, core web vitals, and deep app linking. Now, I'm delighted to also add that Google specialists and experts will be on hand for the 2 hours after this live stream finishes to answer any questions you have on that online content. So if you can dive in straight afterwards, then it's well worth doing if your schedule allows. So that's it for now. Let's dive straight into Conversions 2021 with a look at some data that will provide a bit of context for everything that comes after. Now, whether our role is focused on apps or on mobile web or digital marketing more generally, in order to convert our audiences into customers, it's essential that we understand those audiences in the first place. And here to help and do exactly that, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Rafaela Strata, Research Manager at Google. Now, Rafaela will be sharing with us the latest research on smartphone user behaviour in 2020. So Rafa, you've got the data in front of you at your fingertips. Are we right to focus on a mobile future now?
Absolutely, Ruben. And let me show you why. Hi, everyone. My name is Rafaela Strata, and I'm a research manager here at Google, specializing in everything mobile. And I'm here today to walk you through 2020, again, while using a mobile perspective. So as you know, mobile has been growing for years. And in the 2020, the number of smartphone users reached 3.5 billion. So roughly every second person in the world has a smartphone in their hand. And the 2020 is also the year where major lockdowns happen around the world. So one might think that during the lockdown, people would start using desktop more as they are less on the go. But actually what we saw was quite the opposite, with mobile further accelerating in the 2020. So we relied on our smartphone for so many things, from connecting with family and friends to ordering takeaways and grocery, with the delivery session doubling, or also to stay fit with health and wellness apps gaining popularity. But we also use our smartphone to entertain ourselves. So we have listened to podcasts more. In fact, every 4th person in the UK is now listening to podcasts. We also play games, and of course, we watch a lot of videos on our smartphone, actually up to 38 hours per month, with YouTube being the most popular platform. But 2020 has also been the year when hygiene concerns became top of mind, and that increased the adoption of cashless payment. So we saw the comeback of QR codes, another use case for smartphone. But nearly half of the global shopper were using digital payments more than before the pandemic. And the majority plan to continue doing so even after the virus is contained. And in countries like Kenya and Nigeria, mobile currencies and payments helped consumers to fill the gaps left by the traditional banking system. So what we should take out from all of this? Well, that as the adoption of digital payment increases, well, advertisers should think about integrated payment solutions like PayPal and Google Pay or others, just to make the checkout process even more seamless. So people use their mobile not only to make payments, but also to save and invest smartly. But while saving is definitely important, people did also indulge themselves with occasional emotional shopping to feel better during the lockdown periods. And here the smartphone also played an important role. We also saw mobile commerce accelerating and representing a bigger share of online shopping. In fact, for the first time in the UK, 1 in 2 online purchases was done on a mobile. We also spend more time in shopping apps. So around the world, consumers spend nearly 111 billion in app purchases, subscriptions, and premium apps across both the marketplaces. So there is a large and growing opportunities around mobile for business that get it right. So why are people shopping more on mobile? There are several reasons we found. First, people are physiologically spending more time online, either for browsing on social media or connect with family and friends or browsing for entertainment. So this exposure to social ads and the ease of sharing made the shopping on mobile simply more convenient. Second, well, people needed a mental separation from work. So spending all day on their laptops, they viewed the smartphone as a personal leisure time device. And finally, for many who used to shop offline so far, well, mobile was the only or the first device as country went into the lockdown and shops were closing. So if by now you are wondering if the same people use the mobile more or more people started to use it, well, let me tell you that both of these is true. We saw new audiences embracing mobile. So not just Gen Z, but also millennials and baby boomers spend more time on mobile. In particular, those baby boomers who, out of necessity, have picked up new digital skills like video calling relatives and doctors to signing up, online banking, and shopping. This year, they got nicknamed Silver Surfer. So digital service should be designed also with this audience in mind. So increasingly relying on digital does not come without setbacks. So digital well-being is a concern as everyone's time screen has increased. People are looking into better relationship with digital apps, such as mindfulness and meditation gaining popularity. And trends like digital gardens, which reframe the online activity as like a deliberately meditative and unstructured use of time. It is important to be respectful of people's times and helping them to get things done quickly, so they have more time to focus on things that really matter. We also saw that concerns around privacy have grown amongst users. And majority of consumers said they are not 100% confident about how their privacy is protected by those companies whose services and products they are using. For instance, the adoption of track and trace might have made some people more comfortable with sharing location data in some countries, but in others, it might have raised even more privacy concerns. Once again, what is the takeout of this? Well, while platform and regulation are taking action on privacy, it is important for brands to build trust with their customers and to treat user data responsibly. But all in all, how did people find shopping on mobile? Well, consumer journeys over the years have grown complex with multiple touch points, multiple devices, multiple screens. So helping the consumers to navigate this complexity is the essence of a good experience. But nowadays, there are still major pain points happening online, namely like scrolling fatigue, unfulfilled autofill, fragmented comparison, and bringing items to life. And we also saw two pain points intensifying during the lockdown. The first one is a well-known, it's site speed. We all know what is this about, and it should be on top of our list. But there is another pain point that I want to tell you more, and that became even more crucial in this period, which is information blindside. So what is this about? So with the usual purchase habits being disrupted, well, known brands experience problems with stocks and deliverables. So with some companies overwhelmed by the online traffic and disruption of supply chains, well, people were put in like long online queues, or they've been notified only at the checkout phases that their product was going to be delivered in 10 weeks rather than in 2 weeks as expected. So probably it doesn't surprise that people got frustrated and went on searching for alternatives. And this disruption has also influenced the holiday season. So Black Friday and Cyber Monday, a traditional peak moment for many retailers, was spread across weeks as people anticipated problem with the online deliveries. And in 2020, almost half of the Christmas shopping in the UK was completed before the Cyber Week, and 1/3 of the shopping was completed before November. So this disruption and the added pressure on the household incomes meant people were even more eager to find the best product to buy, making the messy middle even messier. Yet overall, a lot of people who avoided shopping on mobile found it even more convenient than they expected. And 30% expect to continue shopping even after. So what conclusion can we draw from all of this? So the 2020 was another year of growth for everything mobile. And as many people rely on the smartphone, it's our responsibility to be helpful and delight them with our services across all the steps of the journey. And with that, I thank you very much for listening to me, and now we'll hand over again to Ruben.
Thank you so much, Rafa. What a great start to Conversions 2021. Loads of data and insights there to get our minds whirring. Before we do go on, a reminder that Rafa will be deep diving into some of those mobile pain points she mentioned in her talk, specifically with regards to the retail and the travel sectors in the on-demand session entitled Mobile Pains and Gains. So do check that out as soon as the live stream has finished. Now, I don't know about you, but I love that insight about the way that smartphone users were seeing that as a way of mentally separating between work and play during the pandemic and the lockdowns associated with it. And certainly that resonated quite a lot with me, I have to say. And in fact, that feels like as good a time as any to see what else we remember about Rafa's talk just now, with the first of our spot quizzes to win some great Google swag. Now remember, it's the fastest 10 correct answers that we receive that will win the great googly prizes. You should see a pop-up on the right hand side of your screen now. If you don't minimize the video, and you should see it in front of you. And the question is this: as we heard, in 2020, every second person on the planet has a smartphone. So how many smartphones does that equate to? Have a little think. Do you remember that data point that Rafa shared with us? If so, pop it on the form, send it over to us, and the first 10 correct answers we receive, we'll be back in touch with the senders to ask you how and where to send your Google swag to. But don't worry if that isn't you this time round. There will be another opportunity a little bit later on in Conversions 2021. So, as the last presentation highlighted, it is crucially important to ensure that we meet our audience's expectations at every part of the mobile journey and every mobile touch point. And that will require maybe a little bit of a mindset change. Again, away from thinking of it as either apps or mobile web, to seeing them as holistic, as somehow complementary. Now, I think we can all appreciate that unless we have unlimited resources, that's slightly easier to say than it is to do. And certainly it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Well, to help us understand how to start to action a more unified mobile strategy, from leadership and culture all the way through to business prioritisation, I'm delighted to welcome our next speaker, Oliver Bourne, who's the EMEA product lead for performance measurement, with a very provocatively entitled presentation. Oliver.
Well, I'm glad you thought so, Ruben, because it refers to a really important question we should be asking everyone in the business. Most of you buy ads from Google to help you achieve your business and marketing goals. So I want to start by asking this question. Does everyone in your business really know what happens after the ad click? And it's not a trick question. Let's take this example of a really simple user journey. So someone sees an ad, taps on it, lands on your site or app, hopefully converts. The majority of businesses we work with invest a lot of time and money into this, obviously. So they make sure the ads are really optimized, they deliver great ROI. And what's surprising to us is that actually a lot less marketers are so focused on the customer journey. So what happens after that ad click? And it's an area most companies we work with underinvest in. It's often seen as a niche, specialized UX design topic, something for the designers to worry about. But every year we find running the ads is actually getting more and more automated. Automated bidding algorithms, attribution models, dynamic creatives, and the like. And that means for marketers, there's actually a lot less to worry about before the ad click. They could focus a lot more on what happens next. So what happens next is actually really hard to automate, right? Apart from personalization of some content, it takes you a lot of great insight and skill to improve that. My colleague Rafa just talked about how it's becoming more important. So more people are shopping online during the pandemic, and the vast majority of that business is now happening on mobile devices. In fact, for most businesses, mobile is really the top shop front. And we know that the competition is just a click away anytime. So even more than physical shops these days, your online shop should be really impressive, exciting, really easy to use. Research from McKinsey, this is from about 2 years ago, showed that companies that are strong at design achieve much better conversion rates and higher revenue growth than those that don't. And they also, as a result, really get higher shareholder returns. Not only that, they get those returns faster than companies that focus less on design. So when we talk about design, mobile experience, what do we mean? Mobile sites, apps, both? And we can go back to some of this research from Skim when we asked people how they shop in 2020. Rafa will do a deep dive on this in an on-demand session later. So we had over 5,000 respondents. Many of those actually used both sites and apps. In fact, 21% said, I started somewhere on the mobile site and then I liked what I saw, downloaded the app and bought on the app. So it really depends on what they're looking for. Take some of these comments from people we had on the study, and you really see that it's about investing what works best for the people. So if you have the money to invest in both, that's obviously always the question. Both can be really complementary. Mobile sites allow you to really quickly browse a huge range. Obviously, you don't have to install anything, configure anything on your phone, and just quickly look at many offerings across many different competitors. But some of these people really like what you see, they like your brand, they'll come back, they shop more frequently. And for them, you can do a lot more. You can personalize content and design, you make it much easier to check out. You can store their personal details, payment details, their preferences, etc. And then they don't need to log in or really struggle every time they buy something with a tiny little screen to try and put in their credit card details. So if you have both a site and an app, what should you link to after that ad click? Well, we found again and again that for users that have downloaded the app, they really love getting deep linked directly back into the app. So take Otto, our example here, is a German retailer, pretty big, turned over 3.5 billion euros on e-commerce last year. And you can really find Otto products anywhere. They're on search, they're on shopping ads on Google, and they have a really good mobile site. Loads fast, delightful experience. But we tried to see what happened when we deep linked people into the app. And we actually saw that they were delighted by that customer experience. Otto almost doubled their conversion rate for those users. And we've done that with many, many customers over the last 2 years or so, and almost all of them see a really significant uplift in ROI. So Google, is also investing in how you can get more out of that cross-platform experience. And last year, we soft launched Google Analytics 4, so it allows you to track both the website and the app data together in one profile. You remember sites had cookies. For apps, we used IDs, but now we use event tracking. So you can really compare apples to apples, the performance of both platforms. Not only that, because you have it in the same account together, you can also look at people who use both your site and your app and get insights into how they like interacting with you. And we have a real GA expert on this, Ilona. We'll talk a bit about how that works later. Right, so we know that designing for the user drives growth, but it's not always easy, right? Even designers, developers, product teams, they have the best intentions. They want to solve for the right thing, but they're often not empowered by leadership to really do that. So how do really successful brands do that? Back to our McKinsey research. So they say that user-first companies have 4 key characteristics. One is they use analytics really rigorously to make design decisions. Second, they don't have silos or very few silos. So that means they don't have separate teams working on the experience in shops, online, whether that's site or app, customer experience, etc. It's all one design process seen from the perspective of the customer. Third, they make user-centric design really everyone's responsibility and have the right KPIs to track that. Fourth, they don't take bold risks, like many companies wait for that big site redesign a few months out or even a few years out, put all their money into that one basket and hope that that works. But the best companies really iterate, listen to users, test a lot as they go along. And then most importantly, leadership is really committed to making all that happen across all the different business functions. So you're probably thinking, Oliver, does Google do all of that? And of course we don't. Every company struggles with this. But those that do solve it, according to McKinsey, get much, much better results. We've put a little handbook together to help you think through some of that and what you need to put in place to become more like that kind of company. So it covers change management techniques, tactics, tools. You could really do a complete user experience overhaul with this system. And the book has 6 chapters, just to go through it quickly. It's building the business case, often for the executive board, assembling a cross-functional team, and establishing strategy. And it's important that both the commercial teams and the technical leadership really agree on that strategy together. We then cover people, tech, time, how to report on impact, and how to make the changes stick in the long term. So it's not just a one-off project, but something you invest in over time. And if you look at the resources tab of this site, you can find the link to that handbook. I'm also thrilled Angela is coming later. She's a colleague of mine, and she'll talk particularly about success metrics that can help you on that journey. So what makes a great mobile experience? Well, first impressions really matter, right? You need to load your content super fast these days. And if you don't deliver what people want quickly, they just click back into search and they go to a competitor. Think about yourself, how high is your tolerance? You click on a link, you look at your phone, and it's just white screen with a little loading icon. It drives you nuts, right? And you go somewhere else. Then make it really seamless for them to navigate and complete key actions. And then lastly, when they come back, think about personalization, obviously based on what they've decided to share with you. But it could be product interest, content interest, etc. So in a nutshell, we dissect as fast, seamless, personalized. And my colleague Anna will go really, really deep on some of these later on. Now, you can say, Oliver, that sounds really conceptual, sounds quite obvious. Back in the real world, we have limited funds. We can't really invest in all of this. And that's, of course, true. So we all have to make some tough decisions on how we invest. Before we close, I wanted to show you how can you sort of evaluate some of the impact on these different investments on different areas of the customer experience. And I personally did this in consulting for many years before I went to Google, and still use it with some of our large advertisers today. And it's particularly good to get really broad buy-in from the executive boards. So it's not the most sort of fine-tuned and perfectly accurate methodology, but it very quickly shows you the order of magnitude of the impact you can have. So let's see how we do that for our three components of the experience we just talked about. First, you look at user reach, how many people visit. And then second, how many people go into your app and how many people go into your site. And generally, we want to use quite a nice long period. So if you do a month or even a year, you're going to get bigger numbers at the end. And then next, what's the conversion rate and the average order by this platform? Or put simply, right, how much do these people spend with you at the end? All right, next we start playing with some of the assumptions about how much better you could get. So let's start with fast again, load speed. If you are loading fast, ignore this one. If you're above, say, our threshold, then you can add something like 10 to 17% uplift in people who actually make it past the landing page. So they come, they're delighted, loads really fast, and they look at more content. And then a few of these people obviously trickle down to purchase later on, which is in your conversion rate. So you may ask what's fast. I like using Google's Core Web Vitals, which is sort of now our standard methodology for looking at speed. You can find more details about that in the resources tab again. And a simple rough idea, for example, is largest contentful paint. And that looks at how long does it take you to really have substantial content on the site. So users know something's happening, I know what's going to come, I can predict it, and I find it exciting. And that should really happen in less than 2.5 seconds. Anything more than that is too slow these days. So what's the next opportunity? Seamless. And we saw earlier that deep linking people who have the app installed can really double your conversion rate for that segment. So you can model how much that will do to the eventual conversion rate. If you find doubling sounds too scary, a bit high, just lower it down in terms of assumption. And then for web, we would look at general user experience. And we know from experience, roughly, you can get increases of up to 20, 30% in conversion rate these days. Previously, when sites were operating a lot worse, you could get higher impact. But this is quite a nice, relatively prudent assumption you could make. Next, we do the same for apps. Improve the app's UX. You could probably get 20 to 30% improvement. And then for web, another thing we do is to look at whether you really use the latest technology for the site. So I know I haven't covered this before, but a lot of you will be familiar with progressive web apps. And that's a standard that Google helped develop, but it's open source. Anyone can use it. You don't have to pay anything for it. And these really give your site some app-like functionality. So you can do offline capability that the site still loads and caches and gives you content if you're outside of network. You can have little functionality to add the site to your home screen, much like an app. So it will install a little logo on the home screen and people can come back straight into your site, which increases usage. And for good implementations of PWAs, we can add another 20% or so of potential uplift. So that gives you a theoretical impact on sales. You can now compare that to the costs you would incur for making some of these changes. All right, I hope you found this useful, if only to get others in your business thinking more deeply about what happens after the ad click. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the day with us and hand you back to Ruben. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Oliver. That was fascinating stuff and lots to mull over and reflect on once again. Thank you. A reminder, in the same way that Oliver reminded us that there are on-demand sessions available which deep dive into a couple of the topics that Oliver touched upon, particularly app deep linking and measurement the next iteration of Google Analytics GA4. They are available after this live stream, so do keep your eye out for those on-demand sessions. Like me, you may also be interested in having a look at the ebook Oliver mentioned about how to create a company culture that is genuinely mobile first. If so, that's on the resources tab of this website. Now, as we've heard both from Rafaela and from Oliver, in 2021, mobile first really means customer first, because let's face it, mobile is where our customers are. And if we are looking to create the kind of experiences that Oliver spoke about, then it's imperative that we understand what our users' expectations are when it comes to how they operate in a mobile environment. Traditionally, this would obviously be something that we do via user tests, and our next speaker, I think it's safe to say, could be considered something of an expert in such things. So for our next talk, Neil Schwartz, who is the Experience Director at CX Partners, is going to be talking about how the Mobile Labs project can help us understand the role that user tests can play in both uncovering and then helping to address some of the key conversion challenges that we have. So Neil, thank you ever so much for joining us today, and not just joining us, but joining us with the data from 100 user tests, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for the introduction, Ruben. I'm delighted to be here. As Ruben says, my name's Neil Schwartz, and I'm a UX director at a company called CX Partners. We're an experience design consultancy, and we help our clients to make better products by truly understanding the needs of their customers. Since 2019, we've been working with Google to help their clients succeed on mobile. And we've been doing this by leading over 100 user testing and action planning workshops with different brands across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And we call these workshops Mobile Labs. Hopefully some of you might have joined one. And the results have been quite amazing, with clients seeing an average conversion rate increase of 20%. And the impact goes beyond the business metrics, with brands recognizing that user testing should play a more prominent role in their day-to-day operations. Today, I'm going to share some of the things we've learned from running all these labs in the hope that it will help you know what to look for when you're next doing user testing. Whilst most of the labs focused on mobile web, everything we learned could be applied to web or app. User testing may not be new to you, but I'm just going to step back briefly and reflect on the reasons I think it's so effective. Put simply, user testing is about watching real customers thinking aloud while they use your product. It's a simple but incredibly effective research tool that you should be using to improve your digital products and ultimately your business. In my view, there are three things that make user testing so powerful. Firstly, user testing is really insightful. We consistently find that the insights gained through user testing could not have been discovered by analyzing data alone. And that's because whilst data tells you what users do, user testing tells you the story behind those numbers. It shows you why users do what they do. User testing complements the data you gather about your customers in your analytics. To make better products, we need to use both. Secondly, user testing is hugely impactful. Often teams have misconceptions about their users and are surprised to discover that customers actually think completely differently from them. Watching someone experience a problem that you didn't think existed can be disconcerting, but ultimately it inspires teams to take action. Being able to understand what your customers really need presents new opportunities and gives you a much better chance of implementing ideas that work. It's worth remembering, even small improvements can lead to great business results. Finally, user testing is cost effective. By observing just a small number of real customers using your mobile website or app, you can understand what they need, what they find difficult, and what they value. Industry research shows that you can speak to as few as 5 user testing participants to draw meaningful insights. And as we showed in 2020, it can be just as good or even better to conduct remote user tests, so you don't need any expensive equipment or labs. So what did we learn from running 100 mobile labs across 13 different countries? Whilst each lab was unique, I'm going to share 5 of the most significant barriers to conversion that we saw across all our labs. The first barrier to conversion, the brand didn't stand out. For some brands, particularly those entering a new market, we found out that they didn't stand out from the competition. One travel brand wanted to understand why they had a particularly high drop-off when customers in Italy hit the payment page. We thought maybe they'd got the payment options wrong, but in fact, we discovered that the payment options were just fine. The real issue with the payment page was the fact that it was the first time in the journey that users had seen the total package price. Because users weren't familiar with the brand, they also didn't know what made them different from any other company offering holiday packages. Were they the most luxurious? Did they have the best service? Did they have the most breadth? Or were they just the cheapest? This wasn't clear to customers throughout the journey and presented a big barrier when it came to completing the purchase. The second barrier, users didn't understand what was on offer. For brands selling more complex products, such as those in financial services, we found that users simply did not understand the product or proposition clearly enough. We worked with a large car hire company to help them understand why their insurance packages were not converting as well as expected. By observing customers using their mobile website to make a booking, we discovered that users found it very difficult to compare the different insurance packages. But even more worryingly, users actually didn't really understand the product or the level of cover they were buying. By understanding these important problems, the product team was able to create a new design for this page that rectified these issues. The third barrier, and this was a big one, users couldn't find the product they were looking for. One of the biggest problems that affect many brands, particularly in retail and travel, was product discovery. Time and again, we saw users struggling to find products because filters didn't match their expectations. Users have well-developed ways of navigating large product categories, and anything which blocks this process is a problem. User testing helps us find out, do we have the filters users want? Are we using labels for our filters that users understand? Do our filters operate in the way users expect? And finally, have we positioned them on the page in a place that users can easily find them? During mobile labs, we often found it was one particular filtering criteria that was most important. For one retailer, we wanted to understand how to increase the conversion rate for their kids range. There was a kind of aha moment in the room when the team discovered that the most important criteria for parents, other than size, was the material the product was made from. They wanted to find products that were made from natural fibres, but could only do this by going in and out of the product details page, not by using the filters. And finding the right product doesn't just mean having the right filters. We also saw issues where users were unable to easily compare products. During one lab that really stands out in my mind, we were working with a retailer that sold DIY products. One of our participants wanted to buy a power tool, and he used the filters on the product listing page to get him to the products he was most interested in. But the products he was considering purchasing were nowhere near each other on the list, so to compare, he had to scroll up and down the page, struggling to remember the points of comparison. Which one was cheaper? Which had the most accessories? Which one had the best reviews? And so on. He just about managed it, but it was really much harder than it should have been. The fourth barrier, users couldn't find critical information. Again, this was huge across all sectors and markets. In every research session, we asked people to tell us about their non-negotiables, the information they needed in order to feel reassured that they were buying the right product. Too often we saw content that users really needed in order to progress being hidden to save space. Critical content would be buried behind an information button or a show more link. And people don't expect to have to hunt for critical information, and they were likely to abandon. For retail, users needed content that brought the product to life. They'd often rely on high-quality imagery and customer reviews, but they particularly trusted user-generated photos of products being used. For fashion, users needed to know how the product would fit. Was it true to size? Should I go up a size? How would it compare to other brands? And what did other customers think? Finally, information about delivery and returns was critical, particularly on the product page, which in many cases is the first page a user interacts with. People have high expectations and consider poor delivery and returns policies to be a deal breaker. Information about your delivery and returns should be front and center. Users would get frustrated if they had to leave the product page to get to the details. How soon will I get the product? Are returns free? And will it be a hassle if I have to send it back if I've made a mistake? For users buying financial services products, reassurance was equally important. One finance brand we worked with saw a huge dropout in the funnel that they couldn't understand. So we focused on this part of the journey with their users. The website had a message about 0% commission, which you'd think would be a good thing, but it made users suspicious. How do they make money then? So they'd wander off to find that information on the website, or they'd drop off altogether. Adding a transparent explanation that only specific transactions are charged for helped create trust and solved the drop-off problem. The final barrier, users didn't know why they were asked for their personal information. Privacy is more important than ever, and we heard it consistently in mobile labs. In one lab, users wanted to get a quote for a service, but had to enter their email address and phone number to see the price. They were still at the early stage of their research and were worried that they'd be contacted by pushy sales teams if they shared their contact details. In retail, we saw people that definitely did not want to create an account or enter their payment details, in part because they're worried about the safety of their data, but mostly because they couldn't be bothered. Users told us they'd rather give up on their purchase than go to the other room to go and get their credit card. In short, people still hate filling in forms, they're wary about inputting personal data, and they want to know how their personal data will be used. So that's the last of the conversion barriers that I'm going to share today. I hope you're thinking about the things that you might find out from talking to your users. But before I wrap up, here are 3 things that you should consider to make your research as impactful as possible. Number 1, set clear goals. For every mobile lab, we set a clear and specific business goal right at the start. Ask yourself which metric you most care about. What does your data show? Perhaps it's conversion rate across the whole purchase journey, or maybe there's a particular drop-off that you can't explain. Perhaps you're interested in particular markets or audience segments, such as those that currently convert less well. Having a specific challenge focuses the research, it motivates the team, and helps them to prioritize which solutions to test. Secondly, user testing is not just for the UX team. You might remember from Oliver's talk earlier about the importance of breaking down silos. Brands tell us that the biggest blocker to implementing improvements is organizational misalignment. It really pays to bring stakeholders from across your organization to play an active role in research. This might include people from product or tech or marketing and senior decision makers. By bringing a cross-functional team together, everyone can see what's important to your customers, and this really helps break down those silos. In our experience, even your CEO and CMO will find these sessions useful. Get them to come along. In their busy day-to-day jobs, they often lack direct feedback from their customers, and they'll find these sessions eye-opening, and their buy-in can help you secure resources. But bringing cross-functional teams together is not just good for alignment or for securing buy-in. Hearing what users have to say excites people about the problems they have to solve. And of course, collaboration helps everyone bring something to the table and leads to more creative solutions. Finally, diversity of participants. Give good consideration to the diversity of your research participants and include those criteria in your research screener. You won't be able to cover all areas of society in your sample, but you can look for opportunities to include underrepresented groups. This makes good business sense because the more points of view you hear, the more opportunities you'll find to improve your product. I hope you agree that there are lots of benefits to doing user testing, whatever industry you work in. I've shared a handful of stories from mobile labs, and we've literally hundreds more like them. The one thing that runs through all of them all, we wouldn't have gained that insight without talking to real users. Every business should be conducting user testing regularly in order to uncover new opportunities and make improvements that will help them grow. You may choose to grow your in-house research capability and user testing operations, or you might choose to use a consultancy like CX Partners for support. Either way, I hope this talk has inspired you to take action so you can find out what is important to your users and check that your product really meets their needs. Back to you, Ruben.
Wow, Neil, what can I say but thank you so much. So much there I barely know where to begin. And actually, on that point, why not check in and see how much we have remembered from Neil's presentation with the final of our little spot quizzes to win some great Google prizes. As always, fastest finger wins. The first 10 correct answers we receive will win the Google swag. And once again, you should see a little pop-up on the right-hand side of your screen. If you don't, minimize the video and that should be up there in front of you. So, Neil finished his session with 3 things to consider in order to make your research as impactful as possible. So, simple question, can you remember what those 3 things were? If you can, let us know, send us the form, and if you are one of the first 10 correct answers we receive, you shall be the worthy recipient of some great googly goodies. We will be in contact and to find out how to get those goodies to you in the very near future. Okay, so before we dive into the final piece of content today, and before I introduce you to the final speaker of the day, I actually have another question for you. Not a spot question this time round, but a broader one. What has been your biggest takeaway from Conversions 2021 so far? Have a little think. Mine has been, I think, alignment is the biggest theme I've taken away. How important it is to align our campaigns with mobile behaviours. How our business prioritisation can help align our mobile web strategy with our app strategy. And as we've just seen, how we can start to understand our users' needs and expectations and align their experiences on mobile with those needs and expectations. Now, of course, in order to deliver on all of those things, then there is one final piece of alignment that's probably the most crucial of them all, and also probably the most difficult of them all. And that's the alignment we need to undertake internally so that we can all focus on a mobile future now. To help us navigate this challenge and to share some of her metric-driven secrets for ensuring true cross-functional collaboration, please welcome our final speaker of the day, Angela Holzenbein from Google. So thank you ever so much for joining us today, Angela. And just before we begin, I'm presuming that your role requires you to work very closely with a whole slew of cross-functional teams. Is that correct?
Yeah, indeed, it does, Ruben, and thanks for the introduction. I have worked that way for many years. So currently, I'm a quantitative user experience researcher at Google. My role is to answer user experience questions with data. I did this previously at Google Calendar and YouTube Ads, and now I do this at Google Cloud. One thing I often get asked by my cross-functional team is how we can measure the success of our users, products, and business. As Ruben mentioned, over the years, I've set up success measurement quite often and realized that you can actually drive alignment within your organization through metrics. So today, I'd love to share with you how you can drive alignment within your organization or agency through success metrics. Practical tips and how to set yourself and your organization up for success. But first, let me tell you a story about what often happens when collaborating on a project cross-functionally. This is something I have seen at Google many, many times, and maybe the story sounds familiar to you. So once upon a time, there was an awesome project team that included different roles and backgrounds. Meet our protagonists, Lucy, the product manager, Jim, who is an engineering manager, Jeremy, the designer, and Lisa, the developer. They feel the project is going well. Everyone is building their pod. But now, with deadlines coming closer, one can observe that everyone seems to pull a little bit into a different direction somehow. So Lucy, our product manager, suddenly seemed very focused on revenue and growth, and this seemed to be the only thing she really cares about. And Jim, the engineering manager, wanted to wrap up this project really fast and was willing to do shortcuts the rest of the team was not willing to take. So Jeremy, the designer, focused on user delight and monitored user satisfaction fervently. And Lisa, our developer, had concerns about the feasibility of new aspects and ideas the team was bringing to the table, given the current infrastructure and technology. And then suddenly, no one really knew why. The harmonic setup and promising team collaboration seemed strained. So how can we align Lucy, Jim, Jeremy, and Lisa? Let's take a closer look at what is important to the different team members. So, okay, this might seem quite obvious to you, but might be hard to spot when you're right in the weeds with your project. It looks like different people and roles are valuing and prioritizing different aspects of what project. And they have very different goals. Lucy wants a project to break even and get profitable as fast as possible. Jim wants to minimize the time investment for the project, given all the other projects going on in the organization. Jeremy feels that in the last project, the voice of the customer was not prioritized and wants to ensure that this time, customers get the best service and experience possible. And Lisa has seen in a previous project that the infrastructure did not scale and wants to ensure that this time it really does. And these different goals that the team members have translate really into different metrics. So Lucy's metrics are revenue and growth or adoption. Jim's metric is resource cost. Jeremy prioritizes user satisfaction. And Lisa's most important metrics are really uptime and latency. What's worth here to note is that different people might have a very different answer when asked how the project and the team are doing. Depending on how their preferred metric looks like, the answer might vary from really great to, oh God, utterly terrible. This will impact how other teams, leadership, and management judges this team and their outcome. Probably chaotic, not really aligned, and definitely not set up for success. So, how can a project member help their team and align on what their success measures look like and what metrics the team optimizes? So, I work at Google, and Google is a metrics-driven company. As I said, as a quantitative researcher, often tasked with coming up with really good metrics for different projects, I have seen this described situation happen quite a few times. So if the previously mentioned scenario sounds familiar to you, then you're in very good company. But where there's a challenge, there's hopefully a solution. So here's the success metrics process that we use internally at Google to tackle this challenge and come up with metrics that help us to build, launch, and prioritize. There are 4 steps in this process. Sharing goals, the blue bit. What does success look like for the different team members? Gathering signals, the red bit. How might we measure what we identified as success? Making it actionable, the green bit. How might we define action items depending on how the metrics look like? And monitor and adjust, the yellow bit. What is your project's metric story? Is your project successful? Let's start with the first step of the process. One great way to make sure that the goals are aligned is to share them and share what success looks like for the different team members. Well, now this might seem very, very obvious to you, that you share project goals in the beginning of a project and, you set them. But how many teams do that really formally in a dedicated space and time? Do you really have this one source of truth document that every team member references to document your project's goals? So once you have shared your goals and align on a handful, it is really time to translate them into something measurable, which is metrics. There's also a brilliant paper by some of my colleagues defining success metrics, which is linked in the supplemental resources for this talk. I really recommend reading this. Now, if you remember only one thing from this talk, it's this. Please agree only on 2 to 3 success metrics, or rather North Star metrics, that guide you and your project team. Don't settle only for one metric, and don't go for more than 3 metrics. Well, you might ask why. So you don't want one metric, as a single metric might fail to give you a full picture. Let me give you a quick example for that. So I want you to meet Anna, who just launched a new app recently. Her one and only North Star metric is 28-day actives. So this metric counts how many unique users were active in the app within a month. This metric is growing over time, so more and more users are active in the app. It's time to celebrate, no? Or is it really time to celebrate? What if we would also monitor new and existing users separately? Turns out, in this case, the app is gaining a lot of new users over time, but losing existing users. So users seem to try it out, but not really come back. Oh dear, maybe not a reason to celebrate after all. Well, thankfully, Anna here has not only chosen one North Star metric, the 28-day actives, but also has the additional metrics new and existing users, and has a full picture of what is going on with her app. So as I said, agree on 2 to 3 success metrics and not just only one. You also don't want to have more than 3 metrics. Well, why? Well, because then you really end up like Lucy, Jim, Jeremy, and Lisa. Everyone chooses their favorite metric, runs away with it, and pulls into different directions. Okay, now you have agreed on 2 to 3 metrics, but are they really useful? Here's some questions you can ask yourself and the team to see if they are indeed useful. What are the organizational priorities? Why does this project exist? Do your metrics reflect your organization's or agency's priorities? Think also about the actionability of your metric. Is it actionable? Or is it purely informative and you cannot act on? Or is it even a vanity metric? Let me give you an example for that. Now, imagine that Anna here did not choose 28-day actives as a success metric, but the App Store rating. Turns out her app has a 4.9 star rating out of 5 in the App Store, which is fantastic. But really, what is there to optimize? Looks like Anna has already reached the ceiling. Well, this metric is a good FYI and probably makes you and your team feel good, but it is not very actionable to you. So you might want to monitor that, but not choose that as a North Star metric. So to summarize, a good North Star metric is really comparable. So across time periods, customers, users, or competitors. It is also understandable. The simpler, the better. Otherwise, the metric is not really being used. For example, what is easier to understand? Say option A, percentage of successful save attempts. Option B, the number of users that clicked on the save button, did not run into an error, and did not abandon the page until the saving process propagated to the backend. Well, that was a mouthful. So probably the first metric was immediately easier to understand. So as I said before, a good metric is also actionable. It's a metric that changes how your team behaves and where the next steps are implicated by the metric itself. Think back to Anna and her app. By seeing that new users are skyrocketing and existing users are churning, she knows she has an issue with keeping current users engaged and should focus here. And that marketing of the app is definitely not the issue. So how do we gather the signals necessary to measure these metrics? There are different sources of data that you can really look at, and different experts that you should pull in and consult, from finance numbers around revenue to behavioral data in logs, SUI interactions or 28-day actives, or self-reported information as customer satisfaction. You want to really plan ahead by figuring out where the signals for your metrics are coming from. You want to build, measure, and test your metrics way before it is critical and they are needed. So think ahead multiple weeks, if not months ahead of a product or app launch to build and implement your metrics, and probably not the night before the launch. Now, remember how I emphasized to make your metrics actionable? Well, now it's time to benefit from the actionability of your metric. First of all, you can try to get a good idea on how to assess if the metric you are seeing is showing you if things are really going good or bad. It's time for benchmarking. One way, and the easiest way, I might add, to benchmark your metric is by looking at historical data. If the organization is measuring the metric already, how did it perform in the past and over time? Or you might have similar projects going on in your organization that measured the same metric. How did it perform through different project stages? You might also want to consider industry standards or gather ideas for good performance and qualitative feedback. Or maybe it is already determined by your CEO or manager or business how the metric must perform to be viable or profitable. Once you have established what the metric looks good or bad means, it is time to define action plans. Plan especially for the cases when the metric looks bad, that's the hardest. What action does your team need to take? Now, this can range widely from we need to investigate further, for example, to why this happens to existing users, to we need to delay the product launch. What's really key here is that you write these actions down to make yourself and your team accountable. Next, it's time to dashboard and monitor your 2 to 3 metrics, and this is my favorite part. You can now observe them over time and compare the metrics to your action plan and follow through with your action plan. Now, what is feasible now that was not before is that you can tell a really clear and beautiful data story about how your project is going. So now, when your manager's manager or CEO or someone else comes asking how your project is doing, now, you and your team now has a clear answer and clear metrics to point to, and the action plan that your team has committed to. What is also worth mentioning here is that it is worth to repeat and adjust the entire process from start to end every 6 months or so to adjust to changing project needs, to make sure that you are still optimizing for the right metrics and steering towards the right North Stars. There you have it, and that's it. To wrap up the entire process, you went from formally sharing goals and agreeing to 2 to 3 metrics, the blue bit, to gathering signals and building these metrics, the red bit, to defining an action plan your team commits to, the green bit, and to telling a data story on how your project is going and enabling your team to make data-driven decisions that everyone can agree on, which is the yellow bit. All right, you might now wonder what happened to the protagonists. Well, turns out they met and shared what they value, what success might look like for them. Turns out that in the project stage that they are at the moment, and in line with organizational priorities, they first needed to deliver a working prototype fast. So the team agreed that in this early stage, they wanted to first optimize for delivering fast, as in project members' time allocated, and focus the bandwidth they had on reliability, as in improving uptime. Now, 6 months later, half a year into the project, the team had delivered a fairly reliable solution to their customers. Now, it was time to reassess their North Stars. It was now a good time to optimize revenue and improve the customer experience, measured through customer satisfaction. And in the end, Lucy, Jim, Jeremy, and Lisa worked together happily ever after. Hey, thanks so much for listening in. And if you take away only one thing today from this talk, is that you should never have more than 2 to 3 metrics to track success for your team and project. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to align. Thanks again for listening. And now back to you, Ruben.
Wow, Angela. Thank you so much for providing such a wonderful end to Conversions 2021. I hope that you, like me, feel now you have all of those practical tips you need to set yourself and indeed your organisations up for success, and obviously measuring that success as well. And in fact, if you're interested in the Google paper that Angela mentioned on defining success metrics, then that's, as always, available on the resources tab of this website. So, kind of brings us to the end of Conversions 2021, at least the live stream portion of today. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have and have found lots of practical tips and insight to take back to your businesses. Don't forget that as of now, the on-demand sessions will be available to you all. And for the next 2 hours only, there will be live Q&A being run by Google experts and specialists with any questions you have around that on-demand content. So if you can, do dive into it as soon as is humanly possible. So with that said, as always, please do let us know what you thought of this special edition of Conversions, the first one we've ever done virtually. And as always, equally, if you have any questions or you want any more information about anything we've discussed across the course of the live streams, please do reach out to your Google representative, who will be delighted to help. In the meantime, I would just like to say thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and take care. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.